Good afternoon.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
Paul is out of touch.
Right, yeah.
Let me try that one again.
No, man, that's cool. Don't worry about it.
Dora is out of luck.
I'm calling for the Gal Friday job.
Are you saying it?
He's trying to fit in.
That is a great hat. Did the producers of Fargo have a garage sale?
Wait!
She's trying to get a break.
Hi, I'm calling about the ad for healthy girls with good SAT scores.
You can take your clothes off in there.
I don't know if that's even legal.
And the semester's just begun.
Try not to be so much like,
You.
Jerry Lewis, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, how about that?
Looks like you banged your knee pretty bad.
No, I'm fine.
Let's put some ice on it.
And all the girlies say I'm pretty fly for a white guy.
You gotta help me. Lisa is all primed. Her helpful friend, Fat Rita, will take her home unless she gets some action, too. Take one for the team.
You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Think you could turn it down a scotch?
Scotch? What the hell is that?
He may not get it. She may not know it.
What happened to the nasty girl who hates everyone, huh?
I don't know. I have fun with you. That's pretty dorky, huh?
Look who you're asking.
But they just might be perfect for each other.
Oh, hey.
Sorry,
This summer, take your best shot.
You have a girlfriend?
Ex-girlfriend. She lost some weight, so she's dating a lot more now.
But remember, winning isn't everything.
Ow.
How you doing?
Loser.
If you could only kill one of the Backstreet Boys, which would you pick?
The one with the really creepy facial hair.
I think for alleged heterosexuals, you both know far too much about the Backstreet Boys.
And welcome back to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. My name is Jesse, and I will be your host. So on today's episode, we are going to head out to the city of New York and not spend a whole lot of money and still have a really good time. It's going to be great. And we might even take in a little cabaret show, go see that show. And and also maybe just try to get away from our horrible roommates. I mean, there's that. But with all that being said, today we're going to be covering a little film from the year 2000. I've been covering a lot of films from the year 2000 for some reason, but hey, it's anniversary year. It's been 25 years since these movies came out, so why the hell not? But today I'm going to be covering a little film called Loser. Now, for me, I believe I remember the marketing of this movie. I remember seeing American Pie 2, probably when I was way, way too young, as I want to do. And I just remember seeing this with, the guy from American Pie and then one of the girls from that. And but I didn't really even know what the hell it was about, honestly. I just was okay, there's this guy and I don't even know what to call that, but it's a took hat. It's a, I don't know, it's not a toboggan, but one of those kinds of hats or whatever, but I just was okay, what even is this? And then as time's gone on, I realized it's the song where Teenage Dirtbag comes from. And it's also the song that the song She's So High by Ty Bachman comes from too, which is fun. I like that song. I like both of those songs actually, but either way. But with that though, I'd never seen it before though. I never really saw it. And it wasn't until I decided, okay, I'm actually going to maybe sit down and watch this to see what even the hell it is. I ended up watching it last year and I generally liked it, and then I just watched it today, actually, for this very podcast. And, I think if anything, like, I think this movie gets a real bad rap. I don't think it's as terrible as everyone says it is. Is it a great movie? I mean, not exactly. But I also think, like, there is a good little heart to this movie in a way. And I do think, like, there are some things I like in this movie. There's some things I maybe don't like. But overall, I mean, I do generally like it. But I thought, why not cover it for the show? Because I finally got around to this and I, just thought, why not, But with all that being said, we're going to go into the figures of the film as we normally do. We will break down some of the plot and characters and try to figure some of these themes, as we are wont to do. But with all that being said, let's move into those figures. So this movie was released July 21st of 2000 and runs at 95 minutes. This is a Sony Picture releasing picture, and it was a budget of $20 million. Now, the opening weekend ranking gross of this movie came in at number 8 with about $6 million, and then overall domestically it only made about 15.6 million, and then internationally it made 2.7 million. I don't really know where it went internationally, but okay. And worldwide it only made $18.4 million. So needless to say, this was a financial flop. And then critically, we're looking at a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes with about 96 reviews, and a 35% from audiences with about 50,000 ratings. So this also didn't do very well critically either. The critic consensus of this movie is, in the grand tradition of teen flicks, Loser comes across as another predictable and underwritten movie with nothing new to offer. And it is 2.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So this film is very noted as being both a loose remake of the 1960 film The Apartment by Billy Wilder, which we'll talk a little bit about. I have seen that movie now, but yeah, there's that. And then also, but yeah, how can you have a movie from the director of like Clueless? Like, how did it just like fall flat, And I'm sure there's reason behind that. But I also think like, the reputation of this movie is not the best, but is there more to it though? I think that's something to kind of dig into and look at. But as I already stated, this was written and directed by one Miss Amy Heckerling. She is, of course, from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She directed that movie, and she also directed Vamps as well. She wrote Clueless and also Look Who's Talking, all sorts of things. Very noted female director. The composer of this movie is David Kittay. He actually also did Scary Movie and Ghost World. He was the composer of both of those movies. And Rob Hahn was our cinematographer. He actually did the movie In and Out with Kevin Kline from 1997, the Joan Cusack nominated performance she got. That and Working Girl, I guess. And he also shot The Stepford Wives as well, the one that came out in 2004. And then our editor is Deborah Chiat, I guess. She actually was also I believe the editor of Clueless, but she also edited The House Bunny and also Harriet the Spy, which I did an episode about sometime last year, actually a year ago, which is crazy. But yeah, so that's what we did for that. And also some of our actors in this movie, I think, is like so kind of fun. So this is very much the Jason Biggs and Mena Suvari movie. So Jason Biggs, of course, is from American Pie. He was in Boys and Girls right after this movie. He's been in Orange is the New Black. All sorts of things. He's been around. Nice Jewish boy, I guess, if anything. And then Mena Suvari was in this movie. She was also in the movie Nowhere. She started on in like Boy Meets World. She was on a few episodes, like 2 episodes of that, and kind of shown up in different things. She had a real good 1999 being in American Pie, American Beauty, and also The Rage Carrie too. Don't forget about that. But we have them as Paul Tannek and then Dora Diamond. So they are kind of our main characters, if you will. Greg Kinnear plays Professor Edward Alcott. He is from Little Miss Sunshine. You've got Mail. He kind of plays this like dick character really in this movie, but he's also also kind of done that in different times. He also was on the show. I watched the first season of it. I didn't really watch after the show Shining Vale with Courtney Cox, which I don't even. It's been so long since I saw on that show, but I remember he's the dad in it. So he's like married to Courtney Cox in the show. So yeah, anyway, this is also we have our asshole roommates, our rich kids. I don't remember their goddamn names. I'm so sorry. But you have Jimmy Simpson, Zach Orth, and Tom Sadowski. Jimmy Simpson, this is like his first film ever. He would then go on to be in Stay Alive and the movie Debs, which I have done a Debs episode. He plays Jordana Brewster's like sidekick, I guess, in that movie. That's fun. He's also former Mr. Melanie Linsky, in case you didn't know that. And they're like still super cool friends, even though they're like divorced and everything. Like they're still really cool friends. So I really like that. I don't know if they have children together. I feel like they might, but whatever. Anyway, the Melanie stands can tell me. All right, please. I would appreciate that. Zach Orth, he was in and Out, which was shot by the same guy who did this movie. It was one of his first films. He also did Romeo plus Juliet with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. He was also in the episode of 6 Feet Under where he is with his in and out little co-star, Alexandra Holden. So that's fun. You know, we love her on the podcast. And so, yeah, but they're in like a little episode of 6 Feet Under together because that's the kind of person I am. And then Tom Sadowski, he was also in, I think, 2 of the John Wick movies, if not more of them. The movie Wild. He's kind of come up a little bit. I think he's also on like, is he on The Newsroom or something like that? Like he's come up a little bit in the past little bit. So, but yeah, this is like one of his first movies. And then also you have like fun little other people in this movie. You have a bunch of different like Amy Heckerling. I almost said Amy Sedaris. A bunch of Amy Heckerling kind of mainstays. Of course, you have Twink Kaplan in this movie, who obviously helped produce this movie, of course, too. Dan Aykroyd's in here. That's fun. He plays Jason Biggs' dad in this. Molly Heckerling is actually in this movie, too. So, of course, that's her daughter. Colleen Camp plays the homeless woman at the train station that helps out Dora in a bind. Andy Dick is in this movie. You see him. But another one I thought was kind of fun. There was 2 of them. Brian Backer's in this movie. He plays the doctor that, we'll get into it, but Dora has to go to the hospital because she gets roofied. And so the doctor there is Brian Backer. For those who may not know, he is the guy that he's in love with Jennifer Jason Leigh in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He's, I don't remember his name. Rat, that's his name. Yeah, I think that's who it is. And he was also in The Burning, in case any of you didn't know that. But yeah, so he's in that. And also the other one, well, Taylor Negron's here too, rest in peace, but he's also a little pizza delivery guy in Fast Times, because I love Fast Times. But it was those, and also Scott Thompson. He's the guy on the cell phone in New York, and he's like talking to somebody on the cell phone, and Jason Biggs and Mena Suvari are walking next to him. He is actually Arnold from Fast Times as well, which is like, he's the guy who is it Jen Reinhold? I think he's like working at the fast food place, and Arnold gets a job there. Yeah, that's that guy. So that's fun. But then other random people. Andrea Martin's in this movie for like a quick sec. Meredith Scott Lynn also, who is Edith Wexler, I think her name is, or Enid Wexler from Legally Blonde. So she would just be in this movie the next year, which is kind of fun. Yeah, just like random ass weird people who are just in this. Of course, you also have the good old uncredited, I think, David Spade and also Alan Cumming are in this. David Spade plays a video clerk, and then Alan Cumming is literally MC because he was the MC in Cabaret at the time. So that makes no sense. But I just thought that was kind of fun to look at and just be like, oh, there's all these like fun different people that are in this movie and just like showing up for a cup of coffee. Like I like that. That's fun. It's enjoyable. But anyway, so yeah, I think with this, like, Loser is kind of this like weird little, it's kind of this mix of like the Gen X and also like early millennial, if you will, kind of on the outside a little bit of it's a bit of a rom-com. It's not like a super dramedy. I think it's more of a rom-com, if anything. But this is coming in the wake of something like, American Pie coming out, really. I mean, at this point, Amy Heckerling had already done Clueless. which, of course, really hit big, and it did something really cool for just like teen movies in general. But of course, like she did that with Fast Times at Ridgemont High as well for the 80s. And so, given the chance to be able to do this film, I don't actually know if she really wanted to. I don't know if she set out to be remaking The Apartment, but that's pretty much what this is a little bit, or it's at least based loosely, if anything. And I also can understand, like, you have these two people who, by this point, I think they shot this in 99, and I think a lot of this was probably shot, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like a lot of it was shot in Canada, and then like certain little things might have been shot in New York. Like there's little parts that were, but not everything was, obviously. But, you're getting these two actors, Jason Biggs and Mena Suvari, because they had done American Pie already in 98 when that was shot, and they came out in 99. And so by the time they're shooting Loser, American Pie's coming out, you have this huge wave of people, and now you're able to market, oh yeah, these two people from American Pie. And then people are expecting something, but then they end up getting something that's not that. This is not like a super sex comedy or anything. It's a PG-13 movie at the end of the day. And that's also the big thing too, is that, actually, I will bring it up now. It's called True Confessions of a Female Director from The Ringer. February 16th, 2017, this was published. And I'm trying to remember the author's name. I will link it in the show notes below if you want to go take a look at it. But I did want to just kind of pull out this little bit from the article, if you will. So the article says, Heckerling didn't put out another film. So they're talking about all the earlier films, and they're talking about Clueless and whatever, and then Heckerling didn't put out another film until 2000, The Bleeding Heart college coming of age flick, aka that movie where Jason Biggs wears a floppy hat, Loser. This film is kind of a mess. Biggs' small town nice guy character is a little too saintly to be sympathetic, and there's a well-intentioned but ultimately didactic subplot about the prevalence of date rape drugs. It was both a critical and commercial failure, making only $15.6 million at the domestic box office and earning a measly 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it was Stovitz. I'm trying to remember who that was exactly. Again, you'd have to read the article, I guess, but I believe it was one of the producers of this movie. Was it Eric Stovitz or something like that? I'm trying to remember exactly. But yeah, it was something of this pretty much was a movie that was claimed, at least, to be ruined in the post-production process. Loser was really good until the studio said, no, you've got to make it PG-13 rather than an R, and then it ruined the movie. And it just ruined the movie. The head of the studio reportedly brought Heckerling their marketing department's research that said PG-13 comedies performed better than R-rated comedies. Of course, now only R-rated comedies work as well. I guess this was the head of the studio, Stovitz or whatever. And Heckerling has stated, I don't even like to think about that one anymore. It certainly didn't do me any good, but I look at the careers of a lot of the men who have had much, much, much bigger flops than that and did not get treated the same. And then when I ask her to elaborate on her treatment in the industry after Loser, though, she characteristically deflects humor. Well, I had to wear this giant dunce cap, she says, but I look good in hats. So she at least took it on the chin, which I do appreciate. That's nice, at least. And it's kind of the way you have to be in an industry like the entertainment industry, even if you are like a director. Like, it's not always easy either. But yeah, I think if anything, like, this was something that was supposed to be raunchier. It was supposed to be kind of a sex comedy, but this is more of kind of a character-driven dramedy, if you will, or a romantic comedy, really. And so, yeah, I think that there was just sort of this already has like an issue with tone in a way, I feel, but it's also like, I don't know. I just don't think this was marketed to maybe the correct people who would have maybe enjoyed it or would have gotten it a little bit more. Not saying, again, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's definitely something where I don't think it was as bad as like everyone was saying it is necessarily. But let's go into like a bit of the plot of this movie and what it's about exactly. So I've already kind of mentioned a few of these things, but I'll just go into it. Paul Tannek, who's played by Jason Biggs, he's a small town, intelligent kid from the Midwest. We don't actually get like a specific state he's from, but just choose any Midwestern state, I guess. He is accepted into New York University on a scholarship, and following his father's advice, he tries to gain friends by being polite and interested in others. However, his new roommates, Chris, Adam, and Noah, they're their names. There you go. That is Jimmy Simpson, Zach Orth, and Tom Sadowski. They brand him a loser due to his polite manner, his working class background, and his determination to actually educate himself. And the trio concocts this like false story for the housing administration about Paul's attitude, even though they're like horrible, but they kind of put it on Paul. And as a result of this, he is thrown out of the dorm, and actually not even like thrown out really, but like he is kind of forced out of there, but he chooses to be like, you know what, I guess I'd rather just live alone then, if these guys have such a problem with me or whatever. And so he's then forced to live in a veterinary hospital. Later, after being banned from throwing parties in the dorm though, this trio convinces Paul to let them have a party at the veterinary hospital. So in the meantime, with all this, we find that Paul is attracted to a classmate of his named Dora Diamond, played by Mena Suvari, who Paul is unaware of her affair that she's having with English professor Edward Alcott, played by Greg Kinnear. So Dora has been working as a waitress at a strip club to pay for tuition before she then gets fired from the strip club. And Dora asks Alcott if she can like temporarily live with him to save on commuting time, but Alcott says no. And Paul notices that Dora is a fan of Everclear and actually gets 2 tickets to go to an Everclear concert. And on the night of the date that they decide to make, Adam, one of the roommates, invites Dora to a party at the veterinary hospital where Paul works, or he lives, I guess. She accepts, intending to leave early to go meet Paul. However, at the party, she is roofied by 2 different people and she passes out. And after the concert, Paul, comes back to the hospital, to his house, and to find a huge mess and an unresponsive Dora. And rushing her to the hospital, Paul learns that Dora has put Alcott as her emergency contact, and he tells Chris the following day without really thinking about it. He didn't realize it. And so Alcott denies, even knowing Dora when contacted by the hospital officials. And as she recovers, Dora and Paul start to develop feelings for one another, but it's very friendly, I guess. Paul does notice though that Dora is still interested or just infatuated with Alcott. So Dora finds a new job, I guess harvesting her eggs for some reason. And she celebrates with Paul. It's really nice. They have a nice little montage of things that they can do in New York that, do not cost them money, which is good. And their celebration is cut short though by Alcott, who has changed his mind about Dora living with him. And Alcott reveals that the roommates, Chris, Noah, and Adam, have been blackmailing him for passing grades. And he suspects that Paul is actually involved in the scheme as well, even though we know he's not, but Alcott thinks he is. And after discovering roofies were used at the party though, Paul actually steals the supply that Noah has and replaces them with placebos, like ginkgo pills or something. And Paul then visits Alcott's office to inquire about Dora and is given his final exam as a take-home test. He turns down the offer of that, which also jeopardizes his scholarship a little bit, but he is standing on his morals. He's standing on business, really, and I appreciate that. Dora then overhears Paul on the phone with his dad, talking about how much he misses her, and maybe he should just go back home or whatever. And Alcott then admits that Paul actually had nothing to do with the blackmail, but instead he is still intending to fail him though. And realizing that Paul really is the only one who's actually truly loved her, she ends this affair with Alcott, and she begins a relationship with Paul, who has dropped Alcott's course and will just take some extra credit to maintain his average. And afterwards, the roommates, their behavior gets the better of them, their lives plummet into failure, and at the same time, Alcott is found out and is sent to prison for having an affair with an underage student, and Paul and Dora remain happy in their relationship. And so that's pretty much the plot synopsis of Loser. But I think we can definitely talk about just some of the things in this movie. So let's, I guess, talk about sort of the main 3 people in this, I guess, although we really have our 2 main characters, Paul and Dora. So I think with Paul, if anything, he is somebody who I look at, and he doesn't really have it of he is this like he's not like a quote nice guy, you know what I mean? Like where that has the connotation of like it can almost be a little incel type thing, you know, where it's like, you know, a nice guy is somebody who thinks that just because he's nice he should then almost deserve to have sex with somebody or whatever, and that's obviously not how it works. You have to actually be interested in the person and be, you know, having a connection of sorts, right? For somebody to be able to, you know, want to have sex with you or any of that kind of stuff. But he doesn't strike me as that, though. I think he genuinely is just somebody who, well, if anything, and we see it in the beginning of the movie, and it is sort of established, if anything, that, you know, this is a big thing for Paul and his family. Like, he's the first person in his family to go to college at all. And he got into a big fancy school like New York University, right? And so you have to take that opportunity, right? Like, when else are you going to be able to do that, really? And so I don't think of Paul as like a bad dude or anything. I think he really is like a good dude, if anything. He's not like a nice guy, quote unquote. I just think he is somebody who he is just so used to what he's already known, being in the Midwest, you know, just having a different sensibility in life and being able to be a little more trusting with people around. And when he then goes to New York City, the big scary city, if you will, right? It's then something where you are now thrust into something where people don't really care at all about you. And that's the kind of the whole thing, is that people want to say, especially with the East Coast, is that people, especially New York, but, you know, even just people on the East Coast in general, the idea is that people are just kind of rude and mean or whatever. And then I don't know, like I've been on the East Coast my whole life, so I don't know, maybe I've just gotten used to it or something, or I just know that that's just how. I don't think you have to be rude or anything, but I definitely think you have to be able to defend yourself and be able to speak up for what you believe and you know, what you would want to say, you know. And I'm okay with being nice and respectful, but also don't cross me when you don't need to. And what I like, though, is that Paul also is somebody who he has a good moral standing too. I feel like he is somebody who understands what's right and wrong, and he knows that his roommates are fucking assholes, and he's like surprised by it because he probably hasn't dealt with it before, really. And so that's kind of the thing. And also talking about like the apartment, I'm not going to dig too deep into it, but you know, the whole thing is like Jack Levin's character is that he's CC Baxter. He works at this insurance company. He has these bosses, one of whom is played by Ray Walston. That's right, Mr. Hand from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It all comes back to here, okay? But yeah, like he, you know, you have Fred McMurray there too, who's kind of the Professor Alcott character in this. But you have like this guy who is letting these managers of his use his apartment to have their extramarital affairs. And one of the people he has there is having an extramarital affair with one of the guys is Shirley MacLaine's character. I'm trying to remember her name. I don't remember. Fran, I think her name is Fran. And so yeah, like you know, so that's all there going on, I guess. But if anything, like, I don't know. I do see Paul as somebody who he understands what is right and wrong, and he understands what's going on. He just hasn't really had to deal with it as much, and he's now learning. And also, we're to assume that these people are like right out of high school too, like, and we're supposed to kind of get that. But I do feel like, if anything, it's something where I don't see him as like a terrible guy or anything. He's just, he starts off a little bit, you know, maybe naive or trying to fit in, if anything, but I don't think that's like a terrible thing, though. And you know, is he coded as too good, almost saintly? I don't know if he's saintly, though. You know, I think he is just somebody, and I think his character, if anything, is supposed to just be representing, okay, this guy who's literally from kind of the middle of nowhere is now coming to a place where it is one of the most hustle bustle cities ever. And now you have to acclimate to that. And how do you acclimate to that when all you've been used to is not having a ton going on and being in the Midwest and not having, the stimulation all the time as what you normally have. I think that's what there's there too, And if you contrast, Paul to the other characters, you have these kind of toxic male like archetypes. You have his roommates who they're like these kind of entitled, narcissistic, people, right? And then you also have the professor too. Like Alcott is just a kind of an asshole. We know that he's a complete asshole because he was kind of this wunderkind. He was this guy who, at 24 became a professor, and he's been with the place, since for 10 years or whatever. And so he has maybe this certain sense of self and whatever, this bravado or this sort of like air about him. And I don't really know, but yeah, I don't know. I just think like this is the kind of guy that I think of Paul as, if anything. I don't see him as like, the quote nice guy. I don't think he is an incel enough to be one, but I also think like he is somebody who I can look at and I can understand why he's different from everybody else though. And I don't know, he's not terrible. I do hate his wig throughout this whole thing though. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm like, I know that you're supposed to make him kind of be like weird, but I'm just kind of like, I thank God he got a haircut at the end. I'm so happy about that because it was just like, I hated his hair like throughout this whole movie. And that's not only me thinking that. There's other people who think that too. But I get why they had to do it. But I'm also just like, really? Why though? But anyway, so we look at Paul that way. And then with Dora, I think with Dora, she is somebody who I think even one of the roommates says like she's a bridge and tunnel girl. And I do kind of get that a little bit, like not the gross way he talks about her, but like I see her as like somebody who is probably from like the outskirts of New York City. She probably grew up in New York, right outside of New York City, and her thing is now she's going to New York University, right? For whatever reason, she's just not really into her family or anything. She doesn't really want to. She really wants to gain a sense of independence from them. She calls her mom and she, checks in, but she can't really go home, if anything, which is why she's having to figure stuff out. She's having to be working to make money in order to be able to try to live and whatever and pay for school and do all of this. And I don't know how much of a stable home life she maybe has. And in that situation, I think that's why she kind of goes towards Alcott. I think she's somebody who she's not diametrically opposed to Paul, or from Paul, but like, there is a little bit of difference. I think Paul's trying to find, he's trying to be interested in people and be, polite and, all of this stuff. But like his dad's told him to be, because, how do you even meet somebody in the city? Like, how do you even do that? And I think Dora, like, she is somebody who wants to do the same. She is interested in other people. She is a lot more smart than, people give her credit for. So I also think like, they are two halves of a certain, they're two halves of something, right? Like, but they're just doing different, if anything. And if anything, like, she decides like, I'm going to be with this asshole of a teacher. And I think she's able to, and I know it's a platitude and I don't, but I'm sure some of it's true too, of like the whole adage of like, love is blind. Like, when you're in love, you'll overlook a lot of things. And I think if she really is in love with, Professor Alcott, it could just be a thing of like, she's using it as stability, because maybe she hasn't really been able to have a whole lot of stability. And so she's able to kind of deal with sort of the bullshit that comes along with being with Alcott, because ultimately he's an awful dude, and he's like, him and like the roommates are kind of deplorable people, right? At least with the roommates you can kind of point to them and be like, oh my god, aren't they like just so stupid or whatever, whereas Alcott's like really just kind of a rude, mean person. Like, he really is kind of an elitist, honestly, and he just, he doesn't even really respect his students, honestly, whatsoever. And it's ugly to see anyway. But it's one of those things where I don't know, like I can understand why Dora wants that stability and why she maybe seeks that in Alcott. But I think once she kind of is able to really see the situation, she's able to have a different experience with Paul, and she's able to have, like, you know, she's still able to be happy with somebody, you know, and she realizes that, oh, this guy doesn't actually really care that much about me. And actually, maybe it's this other guy who's interested, and maybe I need to put myself into there. Maybe I need to, you know, I need to kind of focus my attention more on this dude, honestly. Because ultimately we're supposed to think she's I think we're supposed to think she's 18. That was the thing that kind of confused me a little bit, is they were talking about, like, you know, ooh, like you have to be like emancipated or whatever. And I was just like, wait, like the whole thing of, I don't know how that all works necessarily. I thought you can't be emancipated after 18 because you are a legal adult technically. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, I thought you have to be emancipated before you're 18. And that was how it all worked. And I don't think she is. I think she's over 18 technically, right? Like, I don't know. Because I thought she said that too. So I was like, how the hell are you going to get emancipated if you're already 18? Like, how does that work? But, you know, I just got to let the logic go, baby. This movie is not going to completely make all the most sense. You know what I mean? But yeah, I like Dora. I do enjoy that she is somebody who really honestly is interested in people, and she's wanting to, and she is like a nice, you know, pure soul, if anything. She, you know, wants to help take care of the pets at the veterinary at a hospital, and she wants to, you know, she talks about how, you know, she wants to be one of the lucky people, you know, one of the people who can just be with somebody that they're madly in love with, right? And you get to be one of those lucky people, right? And that's what she wants, and she's willing to do that with somebody who honestly probably doesn't give much of a shit about her, honestly. And that's the thing too, is that, like, you know, her relationship with Professor Alcott, it's really just like kind of exploring this sort of vulnerability that could happen when it comes to this, and just sort of exploitation, honestly. I mean, it's not funny by any means, but it's definitely something of like, why would you just risk it all? Not Dora necessarily. I mean, yes, maybe not the best situation to do that with your professor, right? But at the end of the day, the professor should also not be a fucking idiot and be like, yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, no, you're an idiot if you're deciding to do that. And to be honest, you do deserve to lose your job, and you probably deserve to be getting arrested either as well. You know, police, right? Like, seriously. But, you know, but if anything, like, nobody's really doing anything to stop it. Also because she's kind of into it. Like, she's kind of like, no, I do want to be with Alcott because he seems to really love me. Even though I'm like, I don't think he really likes you. I don't think he really loves you, though. That's the thing. That's kind of the big thing. Because another thing you also notice in this movie as well is that, you know, like, if anything, like, Alcott wants to change Dora. He doesn't love her for who she is. He loves that she's a young lady who is infatuated with him, quote unquote, and that she is, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it's Mena Suvari. Like, obviously she's beautiful. And so the thing is like, you know, okay, cool. But ultimately, boo, he doesn't love you. Like, he wants to just change you. I think if anything, he wants to be able to take you and turn you into this kind of cookie cutter, whatever the fuck, and he wants to be able to do that, and he knows he can try to do that, and that's what's kind of ugly about it, honestly. It's just so gross, is like, you know, people will do that, and if you let yourself do it, you know, and if you do that, it's like, oh God, like, you just kind of sold your own self out, you know what I mean? And that's not great, you know, it's just not great. But yeah, I also think there's something to be said with, like, the idea of just urban alienation and coming to a place in New York City, you know. I mean, granted, I've only been to New York City a few times in my life, okay, to normally just see shows and stuff. But, you know, the thing is that the same as, like, it's not the same, but, like, you know, if you go to a place like New York City or a place like Los Angeles or any big city for that matter, I guess, but especially those places, it's not exactly glamorous there, okay? It could be, you know, New York is cold. It's very not cleanly at all. It's isolating. It's such a kind of, you gotta work. It's a grind. It's a hustle because it's so fucking expensive there. And, you know, you have to constantly be trying to just, you know, so you have a place to be, really, is just, you have to constantly be doing something. You gotta constantly be doing, you know, and then there's just this idea of like people there are just so rude and like they just, you know, bump into you and they're just like, hey, I'm walking here, you know, that kind of thing, whatever, you know. And so, and Paul is complete fish out of water in this experience, but it really does, like, plenty of people also have the same experience, really, when you come into a place where you're just not used to, you know. And not saying like, you know, anything too crazy, but like, you know, but you know, you have the different things. I remember being in college. I went to college in Maryland, you know, right? Not very far. I used to actually work at my college, funny enough, a couple of years ago. But, you know, going to that place, like, you have people coming from all over. So I had people who, of course, were from Maryland and other East Coast places and, you know, other whatever. But then I also had like a good friend of mine, you know, living in, she lived in LA, you know, and she like went to the same high school as like Tyra Banks and Mary Tyler Moore went to. And she, you know, had her own opinions about things. And, you know, she just had a different way of looking at stuff. Right. And other people that I met too, who were just, again, from other parts of the country that I had never really interacted a ton with, honestly, because when would I have? But yeah, I think that's something that college is interesting you can do with, is that you have all these different people coming from different places and they all kind of have these different experiences of like, oh my God, I never really saw snow before I came to Maryland, because when would I have in, you know, fucking Florida or fucking California? Like, when would I have necessarily seen that if I wasn't already exposed to it? You know what I mean? Or I don't know, like any of those places that are going snow, right? But then you like come and you're just like, oh my God. You know, but yeah, I think like there's something to be, but especially in New York, it's just so, it's urban there. It's very much, and also it's not set up like a traditional, it's like this in like Boston, even I think probably Philly has it a little bit too, but schools like NYU do not have your typical college landscape. It's very much like different, you know, dorms are in different buildings and, you know, everything is within buildings, but it's not like a campus, if that makes sense. And so that is also something that just makes it a little more isolating, if anything. But yeah, I think the idea of what is home, right? Paul in this movie, his home becomes the veterinary hospital, but he really does make that a home for himself, which is so nice. And it's way better than what he was having in this fucking roommate situation, right? But I also think like that just kind of is sort of throughout the whole movie, is this idea of just trying to survive in the city, you know, but also having this idea of home. Like, Dora does not have a home. She is not some, you know, she's trying to make one, quote unquote, with Alcott, but Alcott doesn't want that. Whereas, you know, Paul actually does kind of want that. He loves her. He loves, you know, spending time with Dora, and he wants to be able to have that, but she doesn't see that until it's almost too late. And, you know, then she kind of wises up and realizes, oh, maybe this guy isn't the one for me. Maybe this guy is, actually. So, yeah, but I definitely think that's something to be said for some of these experiences. Again, do they do it the best way? I don't really know, but I don't think so. But I do think there is something to be said for some of these college experiences, and some of these things still kind of carry. Not everything does, though, but I do think like I can understand these characters, though, for sure. And yeah, I think also just like I was saying with like Paul, Dora, and Alcott, you know, if anything, like it's not really Paul is not really anything like Jim, really. I don't think. I think he's more of just I think he's just a little bit more maybe sheltered and or just like naive, perhaps, I feel like, with this character than he is Jim, I think. And I think there is sort of a deliberate awkwardness that is happening in this role as well, just because he is kind of supposed to be that way. He does not necessarily enmesh with the sort of stereotypical New Yorker or New York college student or whatever. That's not him. And that is going to make him kind of an outsider, if anything. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think if anything, talk about Professor Alcott again, like he's just like horrible. I fucking hate him. He's so terrible. Yeah, really, truly. But those are like the three I think that, you know, I've already kind of talked about and being able to kind of see them. I think if anything, like some of the aesthetic choices in this, I will say I do love the like outfits in this movie. Mona May really came through in this film, and I really appreciate that for her, for sure. Loved that. Some of the music in this is really great. I mean, obviously, like Teenage Dirtbags, kind of like it literally has like Mena, Suvari, and Jason Biggs in the music video, so it's a tie-in for sure. But I think the soundtrack kind of rocks. Actually, I like it for what it is. Honestly, I'm not mad at it, and I did kind of like the visuals of this in a way. It's not actual New York City, I don't think. Some parts of it are, and then some parts of it are definitely not. But they do try to kind of make, again, this alienating city, if anything. It is trying to kind of make that, if anything, because this isn't a low budget movie by any means, but I definitely think like they're trying to make this as kind of a harsh and unrelenting city, if anything, and that's what it is. And yeah, I don't know. I do think like, if anything, this is kind of a mix. Again, I think this is ultimately a rom-com, and I do think like, not that there's a ton of, the dramatic parts are kind of in there as like, you know, Dora is having to be nursed back to health, which again also happens in the apartment where Fran tries to like commit suicide, and Jack Lemmon kind of has to nurse her back to health as well, you know, that kind of a thing. But I do think like, you know, it does balance, if anything, like there is a certain level of sweetness in this movie with these two characters that are just kind of slowly falling for one another. And then once Dora realizes that Paul actually is the right one for her, it is really nice to see that. And I think they have perfectly fun chemistry with each other. It's not terrible or anything. But yeah, and even at the end, I do feel like it kind of bogs the end a little bit. Honestly, it feels a little rushed, if anything. And I don't love, like, even though I mean I love it in Fast Times, don't get me wrong, like where they have kind of the chirons of like, you know, what happens to them after or whatever. But these ones I was kind of like, okay, like whatever. But I don't know, if anything, like, I think in this situation, I kind of like that, you know, there is something to be said for a bit of the sort of legacy this movie has had, if anything. I think that, you know, for some people, this is kind of a nostalgic comfort watch. You know, again, people would have probably watched this in the wake of something like American Pie and a lot of these different teen films that were coming out. So maybe some people really bang with that on that. And also seeing somebody who, you know, seeing Mena Suvari, who was just so fun, and this person is definitely kind of this I don't know how much of like a manic pixie dream girl she is necessarily. I don't know if she is. Maybe a little, like, but even like Fran, like in the apartment, like, isn't she a little bit like that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's before that term existed, actually. But and there were some like things where it was like, oh my god, like cell phones. Like Dora talking about how she hates people on cell phones. Girl, you'd hate 2025. Oh my god, bitch. Are you kidding me? But yeah, but there were certain things of like, oh my god, having to like find a job through the newspaper and stuff, and like, oh my god, there were just like certain things that were taking me back, honey, taking me back. But yeah, And I definitely think like, yeah, there's definitely something where I definitely think there's people who do not love the kind of nonchalant or like the flippant nature of this movie, talking about like the sort of date rape culture, if you will, or the date rape drugs that were happening as well. I don't know exactly what to say on that. I think this is something where, if anything, that was something that was a reality, really. And I think hopefully, if anything, we've been able to, as a society, I mean, people are still gross and rape culture is still a thing you have to be aware of and be able to try to not facilitate that sort of culture, especially on college campuses or any of these things. But I would hope also that as a kind of society and, young society or whatever, to be like, hey, maybe we should also try to take measures to prevent that kind of stuff from happening, and not have, and that's why we have things like, if you put something in a drink and it turns a certain color, you can know that it was roofied, and all this kind of stuff. I think people are wanting to they're trying to stifle the rape culture, obviously, that can exist in places like college campuses or just like places where men try to pick up women, honestly, and all of this. But I do think like hopefully we're a little bit better on trying to at least like hopefully men are trying to be, sort of, if anything, they're trying to understand the dangers that a woman faces in that situation, being able to quell that, honestly, and being able to use their male privilege, honestly, to be able to kind of stamp that shit out, if anything. And also just like we have to go back to just booing and shaming people who are like gross and, like rapists and stuff. Boo, gross. But yeah, so there's that as well. And I don't know, like the nice guy discourse I already talked about a little bit. Again, I don't think of Paul as a quote nice guy. I think he's just a good guy. He's like Chucky, you know what I mean? He's a good guy. But he's just somebody who I don't think of him as like a incel-y nice guy or anything. I think of him as just like a dude who is coming from he's a fish out of water, and I think that's what I kind of see him more as than anything truly in this. And honestly, I think ultimately this movie was going to be flawed from the start of it, truly. And I do generally like it. I do think it has its flaws though, and it does kind of unravel at some point. But I do think like this isn't the worst, most terrible film I've ever seen, honestly. And if anything, like, it could have just been a movie where maybe it did get fucked in the edit, you know what I mean? And maybe it was just something that it wasn't really gonna work, especially for a PG-13 audience. Although I don't really know what this would have been like as an R-rated movie, and I don't know if I want to know, honestly. But I do think there's a level of sincerity here, and they were trying to do a little something. And I do think, like, even if anything, this movie might have not hit the mark in the year 2000. But I do think they still, made a nice little movie, if anything. I think I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 on my rewatch of it now. And I'm pretty cool with that. I am more than all right with that, because I really do think, like, this is a film where, don't go into this thinking it's going to be The Apartment. Like, you can't really think of it that way, because if you do, you're going to be let down. But I also think, like, if you look into this and you just, think of it as a movie where these two people are on a journey to find themselves in a place that is very hard to just traverse in general, and they end up being able to find one another in the end, and it's kind of nice, if anything. And then again, for some people that'll work, and then for some people they'll be like, this movie fucking sucks and I hate it, and that's okay too. That's totally fine. But I think ultimately, like, I didn't super dislike this movie. I have cooled on it a little bit, but I am somebody who I still still do enjoy this. There is a certain level of comfort I could just have to have when Mena Suvari is on my screen. And, you know, it's just nice to see. And also having the soundtrack here kind of rocks too. Like, it is a good little soundtrack if you like this kind of music and you enjoy that kind of a thing. So I get it. But yeah, I would check this out. I watched it on Tubi myself, so you could still watch it on there. If you would want to, I mean, I'm sure you could also rent it. I don't think it's, you know, it's not worth a rent, if anything. You know, again, not the most perfect movie, obviously, but I think it's a cute little movie. And I think if anything, like, you know, you could probably watch it. If you look at movies within its ilk as well, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe I would watch it or whatever it is. But yeah, so that's what I think about Loser, you know, puts L on forehead, I guess. Did I just like say my action or whatever? I guess this is not a visual medium. What am I doing? But anyway, yeah, I think that's a wrap on Loser, everybody. You know, I would check this movie out. I do think it's a fun little kind of cult film, if you will. I think there are people who still really like this movie and they can still enjoy it for what it is. And, you know, I'm down with that. And, you know, I'm glad to celebrate it. I'm glad to talk about it. And, you know, I think that's pretty much that. But with that being said, though, we will talk about what we'll do next week. But before I do that, I do want to just remind you, you can follow my show on social media at Cult Cinema Circle on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can find those in the show notes, my little social media links. And also, if you want to go on whatever podcatcher you may use and give me 5 stars and a 1 to 2 sentence review, I would love that. It gets people to see the show and it gets people, you know, find my gay ass, and you know, that's always fun. And yeah, and then more people can hear the episodes I've done about the different movies I've done. So that's cool. If you want to send me a professional email, you can do so at cultcinemacircle@gmail.com as well. In case you want to, you know, I don't know, send me a report about Loser, I guess, or whatever you want to do. I don't really know. I don't know, like maybe send me your emancipation papers and I'll take a look at them, I guess. Right. But anyway, and I think with all of that though, so yeah, but next week, what we're going to be covering is I decided I wanted to do something to close out July. And I actually had not thought of what to do quite yet. And then this finally came to me. And I was like, yes, of course I'm going to do that movie. So again, this is another bit of an anniversary, but it's not the year 2000. We're going back to the year 1990. And we're going to be covering a little film called Jacob's Ladder. I decided I wanted to do this. This is a film I don't remember completely. Wasn't it... Adrian Lyne, I think, is the director of this, so I'll have to do some research, of course. But I have seen this movie before. I've only seen it once, so I'm going to watch it again. I remember really liking this, and yeah, so get ready for some psychological horror and some fucking war, I don't know, PTSD, bitch. Like, that's what we're about to get into, okay? But that's what Jacob's Ladder is, and we'll get all up into that next week. But yeah, so go watch this freaky ass movie, and you'll hear about me talk about it all next week. So that's fun. But with all that being said, everyone, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast, and I will catch you all on the next one. Take care. Bye.